He first saw her at the bus stop. One could say it was love at first sight, but she didn't quite notice him in return. She was absorbed in a magazine, her legs crossed daintily beneath an embroidered silk dress. Her auburn hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and her bright emerald green eyes were alive with delight. She was beautiful beyond comparison, so much that he made a move to sit next to her. John Deane was a handsome, clean-shaven 27-year-old software engineer. He graduated in computer science at Harvard University and now co-owned a software company with his best friend Michael Rawl. Michael was to be married that very day, and John was on his way to purchase flowers as a gift. However, his task was no longer at the forefront of his mind. He was fixated on the woman reading the magazine at the bus stop. He brushed a hand through his dark hair, feeling a little self-conscious that he was already losing it along the sides of his head. He blamed it on the stress of his job. Just as he took a step toward the bench, another man of about 30 slipped in front of him and touched the woman's shoulder. "Sarah?" She looked up from her magazine and saw the tall man greeting her, and then stood gracefully with the loveliest smile John had ever seen. As she stood, she let the magazine fall onto the bench. "How are you?" he asked. "William Burnham, is that you?" She opened her arms for a brief hug and a kiss on the cheek, and then stepped back. "I'm well. What are you doing here?" "I was on my way to meet a client, and I just happened to see you sitting over here." "Well, how nice of you to come and say hello." As they chatted to one another of their day and events that had happened since they last spoke, John meandered over to the bench and picked up the magazine. He was curious to know what she was reading, what interested her. On the corner of the magazine, over a stamped sticker addressed to her, he learned her name was Sarah Jane Miller. Her name rang in his head like a beautiful string of notes, clear and soft as bells. He had never felt such a pull before, such a desire to know a complete stranger. Then, as if it were a serendipitous sign from heaven, his ear caught the tail end of Sarah's conversation with William. "Where are you headed?" he asked. Ahead of them, the city bus pulled up to the stop, its brakes creaking. Sarah gestured to the machine. "I'm on my way to my cousin Amanda's wedding." "Oh, how lovely," William replied. John could barely listen further. His brain was buzzing with excitement. The inertia of thoughts was unstoppable. He was so distracted by his stroke of luck that he watched Sarah board the bus without stopping her to hand over the magazine. The doors were already closed by the time he realized his mistake. He held it up to the bus window, but Sarah wasn't looking out. It didn't matter, though. He had a feeling he would see her again. He, too, was headed to a wedding later. His friend and business partner, Michael, had shared everything with him since their university days. There were no secrets between all their great memories together and all their aspirations. Michael had started dating a charming girl 6 months ago, and it was nice for John to see him finally tie the knot with someone. Of course, John had met her a while back and given his thumbs-up approval. Her name, just as Sarah had stated moments before, was Amanda. Amanda Miller's house was an old Victorian style with beautiful brickwork and low ceilings. The wedding decorations were up, strewn with lights and flowers. It had taken Sarah Jane Miller a long bus ride and several transfers to get from Manhattan to Montclair, New Jersey, and unfortunately she had left her magazine at the bus stop, which deprived her of some much-needed entertainment. She had vowed not to bring any work on the trip, which was a difficult promise for a busy lawyer like her to keep. So instead of magazines or work to occupy her time, she had to enjoy the passing scenery of traffic and old buildings on the ride. Although she was very close to Amanda, it had been 6 months since they last saw each other, right around the time Amanda had met her husband-to-be. Still, they kept in contact via email and texting. Sarah blamed her workload for their lack of face-to-face communication. Her uncle greeted her at the front gate. He gave her a kiss on the forehead, his mustache tickling her skin. He was a jovial man, always welcoming people to his home, even strangers, and greeting them with a warm smile. It was something Sarah always loved about him. "How are you, my dear Sarah?" he asked, a smile crossing his face. "I'm doing just fine. What about you, Uncle?" she asked, mirroring his grin. "You still look the same, young and fit." "Oh," he laughed, flattered. "I'm getting older, but I'm well, thank you. I'm very happy to see you, my child. It has been ages." He held out his arm and Sarah took it, allowing him to lead her up to the doorway. "Amanda is right inside." "I'm very excited to see her in her dress." Sarah's smile widened. "I'm sure she looks absolutely gorgeous." Inside, Sarah made her way upstairs to Amanda's room. She knew her way around the house like the back of her hand, having spent many nights sleeping over as a child and wreaking havoc in the living room, trying to make the best fort possible out of blankets, pillows, and couch cushions. Amanda's room was the second door on the right in the upstairs hallway, and the door still had the script writing of her cousin's name carved into it. Standing at the full-length mirror near the closet was Amanda, and she saw Sarah from the reflection and flashed a smile at her. She wore the classic white bridal dress, beaded at the front with a lace sash and long trailing veil. As she turned to greet Sarah, the layered dress ruffled softly. "Wow," Sarah breathed, shaking her head. "You look so different, Amanda." Amanda gave her most teasing smile. "So I had to get married for you to finally find time to visit?" Sarah looked mortified. "I am so sorry," she apologized. "You know how much I want to see you. I've been really busy with the new assignment." "Is that so? I think you're just using your lawyer tricks on me right now." Sarah laughed. "I'm not lying to you, my wonderful cousin. I am thrilled to be here, and believe it or not," she quickly added, "I left all of my work at home." "I don't believe that for a second," Amanda replied with another smile. "So, tell me, how do I look as a bride, good or bad, and no lying?" Sarah put a hand to her chin and circled her cousin, pretending to inspect the lovely dress. Finally, she said, "It's decided. You look extremely hot, sizzling, and sexy." Amanda laughed and shook her head. "Thanks a lot. I feel better now. By the way, I can't keep it a secret any longer. I'm going to introduce you to someone special today." "You mean Michael? I'm looking forward to meeting him," Sarah replied. She felt somewhat bad that she hadn't met her cousin's fiancé yet. 6 months wasn't exactly a long period of time to date before being married, but Sarah had heard so much about Michael that she knew he would make Amanda happy, whether they were together 6 months or 6 years before marriage. "No, not Michael," Amanda said. She played with her veil as she spoke, tossing the soft fabric and watching it float gently back to her side. "Well, you'll be meeting him, of course, and I know you'll love him, but that wasn't who I was talking about." "What does he do again?" Sarah quickly asked, interrupting her cousin. It was just like Amanda to try and set her up with someone, and it was just like Sarah to be a little hesitant. Since work occupied so much of her time, she didn't have much room for a romantic life, though she secretly wished it wasn't so non-existent. And while she was grateful of her cousin's efforts to find her a companion, it was all a little embarrassing. "Michael, he's a software engineer and runs a business with his friend for the millionth time," she smiled slyly. "Is that another lawyer trick trying to change the subject like that? You know, I might be distracted with getting married and all, but I'm not going to leave you without someone to dance with tonight." "Dance?" Sarah cringed a little. "You know I hate dancing." "Oh, don't be like that. John is very outgoing. Handsome, too." Amanda winked and turned back to the mirror. She smoothed the skirt of her dress, examining herself one more time. "This dress isn't wrinkled at the back, is it? Oh, I'm afraid to even sit down in fear of ruining it." Despite herself, Sarah's curiosity had been stoked a little. She pretended to help Amanda examine the back of her dress for wrinkles, but her mind was elsewhere. "Sorry, who is John?" she asked. Amanda didn't reply. She simply flashed a silent, knowing smile at her reflection in the mirror. John stood at the church altar next to the groom as the best man usually did. Michael was looking good in his tux, an excited smile playing upon his lips. He felt happy for his friend, but also anxious with anticipation. He was waiting for his suspicions to be confirmed, and as the string quartet started the soft pizzicato of Pachelbel's canon and the bridesmaids emerged from the back, the crowd all turning to watch, he saw her. At the front, Sarah started down the aisle holding a bridesmaid bouquet in her hands. She was beautiful in her pale dress, her hair tucked up over her neck with flowers weaved into the locks. Her lips were shockingly red, as though she had been pulled out of the 50s. The other girls came out, all lining up across from the groomsmen. The bride emerged to the sound of the wedding march. She looked lovely, donned in pearly white, and John knew he was supposed to be looking forward, but he couldn't help glancing at Sarah more than once, drawn to her. Yes, the bride was beautiful, but Sarah was breathtaking. The priest cleared his throat, and finally the ceremony was underway. A marriage is a way of accepting love and commitment of a man and woman in front of God before moving to a new life. He said a few more words, most of which John missed while sneaking glances at Sarah, and continued on. If there is anyone here who believes Amanda and Michael should not be married today, speak now or forever hold your peace. The church was silent, a silence so roaring that it made John slightly uneasy. The priest continued, Let us proceed. Do you, Michael, take Amanda to be your lawful wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love, to honor, until death do you part? Yes, I do, he affirmed with a smile. John could see the excitement in his eyes. And do you, Amanda, take Michael to be your lawful wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love, to honor, until death do you part? Yes, I do, Amanda replied. John let out a sigh. He liked weddings, especially what they symbolized, eternal love, unconditional love. He had grown up with two loving parents who exemplified what it meant to love. He still lived with his adoring, soft-hearted mother, Jessica, whom he was very fond and proud of. He had promised to be there for her ever since his father, Robert, died 10 years ago. He fought a rough battle with stomach cancer and lost. His passing was heartbreaking for the entire family. His parents' love existed in sickness and in health until death eventually pulled them apart. The exchange of rings came and went, and the ceremony closed with a passionate kiss between the couple. The crowd erupted into applause, and the string quartet burst into music as they made their way back down the aisle, this time as husband and wife. As everyone made their exit to get to the reception, John tried to walk next to Sarah. Once again, he went unnoticed. He brushed his hand through his hair and craned his neck to find her as she became lost in the crowd. In the evening at the reception, John was sauntering by the bar, waiting for another glimpse of Sarah. Almost all of the people at the wedding were at the reception, and some who weren't at the ceremony were present here, probably for the free food and booze. John was about to seize himself a drink when Amanda popped out of nowhere and grabbed his arm. He opened his mouth to speak, but Amanda beat him to it. I want to introduce you to my beautiful cousin Sarah, she said. John's heart skipped a beat. Serendipity. He couldn't believe Amanda was offering to introduce him to the very woman he had his eyes on. Yes, please, he quietly said, allowing himself to be tugged along by his friend's new wife. They approached a table where Sarah was merrily chatting away with an elderly man whom John took as a family member. Her eyes alighted when she spoke, her lips curving into a striking smile. His heart elevated. Amanda cleared her throat, interrupting the conversation. Sarah, This is who I wanted you to meet, John Deane." Sarah turned, blushing slightly for some reason. John realized that Amanda must have been trying to set them up, and mentally thanked her. Sarah was looking at him as if she knew him from somewhere, but just couldn't place it. Finally, extending her hand, she said, "Nice to meet you, John." He shook her hand briefly, the feeling of her smooth skin sending a rush of exhilaration through him. "Isn't it a coincidence?" he asked. "Coincidence?" She furrowed her brow. "I saw you at the bus stop this morning in Manhattan." He shuffled his feet, feeling rather awkward that he had realized this and she hadn't. Amanda interrupted with surprise. "You've met before?" No, I just saw her in passing." John tried to explain, but he cut his own words short, feeling heat under his collar. "Oh, sorry, I didn't notice you," Sarah said, eyeing him with a look of uncertainty. "I didn't realize I was so memorable." John smiled at her teasing. "You left a magazine behind." "Oh my God, I was in such a hurry I forgot it." She smiled bashfully and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Did you find it?" "Yeah, I have it if you want it back," he said. Sarah waved her hand in the air, dismissing the notion. "Oh, don't worry about it. I've read almost the whole thing." She quickly added, "Though I wish I could have gotten it before the bus ride." Amanda suddenly decided that this was her cue to leave. "I've got to see to some other guests. I'll talk to you later." She squeezed Sarah's arm, gave her a triumphant smile, and dashed away. "She's trying to set us up, isn't she?" John asked, chuckling a little. He was secretly glad. Sarah sighed and leaned against her hand. "She does that to me sometimes." At that moment, the band began to play. People started towards the dance floor, dragging their partners along with them. John, like Amanda, suddenly decided that this was his cue to do something. "Sarah, would you like to dance with me?" he asked hopefully. Sarah hesitated, covering her mouth with her hand to hide a shy smile. "No, I can't dance." "Don't worry, I think anyone can dance with the right partner." He gave her a reassuring smile. "Give me a chance. I'll guide and support you on every step." She looked surprised for a moment, but her expression was quickly covered up by another timid smile. "As long as you promise not to laugh when I embarrass myself," she quietly said. John gazed dreamily into her bright eyes. He wanted to tell her that she would look lovely doing anything, that she should never be embarrassed. Instead, he slipped his hand softly into hers and led her to the dance floor. He kept his promise to lead her in every step, and while Sarah stumbled on his toes on occasion, for the most part they were in sync, moving across the hardwood as one. He pulled her closer and said, "See, you've got the hang of it." Sarah quietly laughed, and red touched her cheeks as she let him pull her closer. There was an electricity in their fingertips as they touched, a wave of emotion enclosing them as the dance continued on. John's mind was filled with thoughts of her, his emotions leaking into his eyes, and Sarah's shyness had soon withered, becoming just as lost in his gaze as he was in hers. 2 songs had already passed, and John and Sarah forgot the music and the people around them. By now, the other guests had circled around them, focused on their passionate dancing. When they finally stopped, Sarah wanting a glass of water, she started at the round of applause they received. She blushed, her shyness returning, and she fled from the dance floor, her hand still locked with John's. She pulled him behind her. In the safety of the crowd and loud music, Sarah began to laugh. John joined in, feeling completely silly and something else, something he had never felt before. It was a first for him, this feeling, and he held on to it. In his university days, many girls had asked him out, but he never felt interested. He only dreamed of becoming the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. Romance and feelings never seemed very important. But when he looked at Sarah, something changed within him, a warmth that he liked. They spent the rest of the night talking, and John was even able to coax another dance out of Sarah. It was all perfect, and as the hours pushed on, the bride and groom made their flower-laden exit, sending up another round of applause. By this point, John realized he had found someone truly special. It was not until he glanced at his watch that he realized how late it was. He excused himself and explained that he had a long drive home to Manhattan. "I have to go, but I had a lovely time talking and dancing with you," he said, faltering slightly on his words. He badly wanted to kiss her cheek. "Yes, it's been really nice," agreed Sarah, and added, "and fun." He shook her hand, wishing to feel her warm skin just once more before he left. The breathless feeling returned, and he disappeared outside before his urge to kiss her also came back. While walking to his car, he thought of their dance, of how his heart had felt so full and alive in that moment. And he suddenly realized he hadn't asked for any of Sarah's contact information. No phone number, no address, not even an email. He turned to the door only to see her driving away with her aunt and uncle. He almost considered chasing down the car, but the opportunity was lost. Sarah Jane Miller. What a beautiful name, he thought, as he gazed upwards at the star-filled sky. And since fate had been so good to him already, he had a feeling he would certainly see Sarah Jane Miller again.